For more reaction to the Treasury Secretary and the trade negotiations, what we're hoping is the beginning of a really beautiful and lasting friendship. We're joined by Kyle Bass, Chief Investment Officer with Heyman Capital Management, and former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. And this could go, I think this could go on the road. I'm not sure what could eventually happen from this, but you're on the left, at least on the screen, Kyle. What do you make of Secretary Mnuchin's comments that you just heard? And then we'll get to Steve Bannon.
You know, look, from my perspective, I think what this deal is, it's a détente, right? This is a temporary truce and a decoupling between the U.S. and China. I know it's billed as looking like we're bringing the sides together, but China, in the end, gave in to pretty significant concessions. And the U.S.'s position, where we said we're going to leave tariffs in place through the end of the year, was something China just had to swallow because they had both announced that they were going to sign this on the 15th. So no matter what was announced, they were going to have to sign it today. The bigger issues, I think, that are involved here, this is a really simple deal. What we're signing here is China's desperately short food and energy, and they have to buy it from somewhere in the world. And what we did is get them to buy it from us. What I think is particularly significant about the deal, I haven't read the deal yet, but going over what's reported, is now this is measurable and enforceable, and we're going to hold the Chinese to it. And that's the first time anyone's ever been able to get the Chinese to sign a deal that's measurable and enforceable. So I think that's particularly important. What they're buying from us is insignificant from my perspective. And I think this buys time for President Trump into the November elections, and it buys Xi the time he needs to become more self-reliant and not rely on the U.S. for a number of things. So I think this just buys both sides time, and they can both bill it as a win.
But, Kyle, that is not consensus, Steve, that we actually got something. I think what we're really hearing is that, you know, we went through a lot of machinations to get very little just to end the truce.
I couldn't disagree more. Here's why.
So you agree with Kyle?
No, here's I even more than Kyle. I think Kyle downplays it. I think what you're seeing in this signing today, coupled with USMCA being done in the same week, hopefully, where USMCA makes North America and Mexico a geostrategic manufacturing alternative to East Asia. Today, you're seeing what President Trump's going to do is the beginning of the end of the managed decline of the United States. Kyle's right. It was his tariffs. He went against all orthodoxy, economic orthodoxy, and was lambasted by people came on this show, the financial press, the Wall Street Journal op-ed page. He stood up for the tariffs, and he broke the Chinese Communist Party. We gave up very little at the end. We gave up some potential tariffs in the back end to start the beginning of working, not totally, on forced technology transfers, on intellectual property, on getting access financially to their markets. But most importantly, to show, and you've got, look, EU, Japan, ourselves talking about the state-owned industries at the WTO yesterday with the EU. You're seeing Trump in a geostrategic context go after China as trying to be a hegemon in the Eurasian landmass. This deal today, this is why Xi's not here to sign it. This is why the state-owned media in China is not talking about it. The hawks over there don't want to talk about this. This is a huge win for President Trump. This stops, and think about it. Steve Mnuchin sounded like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I thought it was Peter Navarro talking about the tariffs. Last night on the stage of the Democratic Party, I really didn't see many people disagree with his trade policies. Donald Trump has changed the entire center of gravity of the way even the elites have to think about China. And I think this, and as a protectionist and someone that's in the Peter Navarro, Bob Lighthizer camp, you know, President Trump stuck to his guns. And today he gets the deal. It's only the phase one, remember. But directionally, I think this thing is very powerful. And I think that he's playing up to the reformers like Lee He. If the reformers can now have some runway in China and make some fundamental changes, and we reverse this decoupling on technology that they announced, which is the single most important geopolitical event of 2019, I think you can have eventually get back to the Lighthizer-Trump deal of May of 2019, which is the central thing we want to basically merge the industrial democracies of the West with the Chinese.
Steve, you're okay with the tariffs getting rolled back in some instances, not put on in other places? You're okay with a lot of the things that we thought we'd get immediately put in? Because I will say, I thought Peter Navarro might have wanted it to go even a step further and quite a bit further.
Yeah, listen, yes, Navarro, Lighthizer, what they call the Kyle Bass, Bannon, Superhawks, absolutely. But what we have in place is Damocles' sword. Right, and people should. I think today, when you see the tariffs, I think when this thing comes out on the enforcement mechanism, they've got some happy talking about bilateral assessment. Mm-hmm. This enforcement mechanism that I think Lighthizer got in there for the president, I think the president demanded it. Donald Trump is judge, jury, and executioner on this, okay? If he thinks, and remember, his big thing is no games. If he thinks there's games being played,
tariffs just come back.
Unilaterally, he doesn't have to go to WTO. He doesn't have to do anything. Bang, they're on. And so that's Damocles' sword. He's going to give them a chance to try to see if they will actually live up to a commitment, not like they stiffed Obama and Biden in the Rose Garden with the cybersecurity and the militarization of South China Sea, not like they lied on the Paris Accord and now they've got $500 billion of coal-fired plants, not like they lied on Hong Kong. The Chinese Communist Party has lied to every institution in the world about what they're going to do. Donald Trump is finding up a mechanism to hold them with transparency, accountability, and enforceability to hold them to account in front of the entire world. And that's why this is so important. This begins the end of the managed decline of the elites in this country, and this is Donald Trump and his tariffs.
Kyle, do you anything that Steve Bannon just said that you think is that you disagree with, or does it take it even further than where you were?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with almost everything that Steve's saying. I think one point that Becky made in her questioning of Mnuchin, well, make 2 points. One is on the sanctions that the U.S. is supposedly engaging in, where we're sanctioning Chinese entities as far as their relationship with Iran. One thing that Secretary Mnuchin's not doing is we know the Chinese buy the most oil from Iran. We know the ships and shipping companies they use, but to fund the purchases, they use Chinese SOE banks. We know which banks they're using. Our Treasury should be sanctioning Chinese banks today. That's something we haven't been willing to do. It's something Trump hasn't been willing to do. And we talk like we're going to sanction companies that are contravening our sanctions on Iran, and we're not doing that. But I think more importantly, Becky hit on something when she was talking to Mnuchin that I think is worthy of our discussion, and it's whether or not we should talk about human rights in the same context or same conversation as the economic or national security concerns. And Becky, I don't know how many of you have read the ChinaTribunal.com, that the tribunal that Sir Geoffrey Nice ran in the UK on live organ harvesting practices of political prisoners in China. But China is arguably committing the largest crimes against humanity of anyone in the 21st century, and yet we can't wait to sign another economic deal with this evil regime. And I don't understand how Wall Street decouples itself from the national security and human rights perspectives of China. And I think that's something that should be discussed first, not second or third, or put away and let us read it another day. This is something that's enormous, and it's not being discussed. And so I'd love to hear Steve's view on that, as well as Becky's.
He's ready. Faces.
Yeah, listen, the Wall Street elites and the corporatists have looked the other way in China. There's no doubt. But let's talk about, remember, President Trump, this is across the board. We have a whole of government approach and confrontation with the economic war that China's been running on us for 25 years, right? That's what the centerpiece of this agreement is. But in addition, look at what's happening. Look in Hong Kong. Okay, the revolt against the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party in Hong Kong. Look at the proxy in Taiwan that last week, the landslide victory, and the landslide victory a couple months ago in Hong Kong also. Look at in Tehran, in Beirut, in Baghdad, in Tehran, they're in the streets supporting Americans. I mean, they won't walk in the American flag in Tehran. This is all the Trump program. People understand he's choking down the Chinese Communist Party. He's choking down their allies like in Tehran. And I think this is a whole cloth, even on Huawei. See, I think the way Trump looks at this, They're not separate. They're actually all together.
I would say, should they be on separate tracks, or should this all be combined? Should you be able to come up with economic agreements and say, okay, we're not going to deal with the Huaweis, we're not going to deal with the Uyghurs, we're not going to deal with Hong Kong rights, democracy rights?
The way they wanted to break it down was that, hey, the 40-40-20, they're in different buckets. But I think the way, if you look at the way Trump is doing it, even with Apple, Trump, and really at a strategic level, it's all happening at one time. Remember, when he first came in as president, our government had this kind of the pivot to Asia was kind of hit or miss. It was all over. He now has, if you look at Pence's and Pompeo's speeches, we have a whole of government. We're patrolling the South China Sea and the Straits of Taiwan, again. We're confronting. Matt Pottinger is in London to convince the British government that they can't go with Huawei. Rubio is now talking about actually having some sort of billion-dollar fund. You have the entire government and the I agree with Kyle. It's been outrageous what Wall Street and the corporatists have looked the other way on China, but now all these things are coming together, and Trump's leadership on getting the economic.
But that's almost an argument that we shouldn't have a phase one economic agreement.
No. I think the phase one agreement starts. Listen, what we don't want. We have an information war going on and a cyber war, and we have an economic war they've been running us. What we don't want is to have this devolve to a kinetic war, okay? This is to make sure that, and this is a hot war economically and a hot war on cyber and information. We don't want it to devolve to the other. And that is why Trump, I think, is being a statesman and trying to do these in segments, right? But they're all of one piece.
Walk us through then the permutations with which you get to that second phase of a deal in terms of how you get to the intellectual property issue. I mean, Secretary Mnuchin says that Huawei is not a chess piece. I think you probably differ on
I also I respectfully disagree. I think it's not part of the Chinese government. It's the front of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. It's their telecommunications department. You know, I'm a much more hawk on Huawei than even a lot of the hawks in the administration. I think Huawei is the Trojan horse inside the West of the telecommunications.
It ultimately forces the issue?
Yes, I think we're definitely going to force the issue. We're going to do it in component parts, and I think we're eventually going to do it on systems and technology. I think Huawei's got to be shut down. I hope that we see the strength in not allowing the chief financial officer to be sprung in Canada, in the coming weeks. I think her trial starts, or the. Even
though it has meant for Canadians that they've had a couple of business leaders who have been picked up in China.
That shows you how the Chinese communists work, right? No, I think that this is, and by the way, you're getting more and more voices onto this today. You're getting more and more voices. But it'd like to have Chuck Schumer take a cheap shot. I never saw during the Obama administration anyone stand up to the Chinese Communist Party like President Trump.
Can I ask you a related question, because we talked to the Secretary about it? When you think about how the U.S. is treating or thinking about Apple relative to the way you might think that China treats Huawei?
Look, I agree with President Trump. I think Apple's got to, I think they ought to be moving their manufacturing back here. I want to see the supply chain start coming back.
But do you believe it's appropriate for the U.S. government to force Apple to provide a backdoor access to those phones?
Yes, 100%. I don't think there's any doubt.
That they need to?
Yes.
And wouldn't that be antithetical to the idea of, do you want our technology companies in the same way that I imagine you look at Huawei as an arm of the Chinese government?
But that's different. Apple is a totally independent company. Even if you had a backdoor, Huawei is part of the PLA. That's the difference. It's the telecommunication arms, not of the Chinese government, of the People's Liberation Army. It's two totally different things. One is about getting access, right? The other is about you actually own the entire system.
If you're Tim Cook, given the relationship that he has had with the president, which has been a good relationship for Apple, how do you think it changes in this dynamic, or does it?
I think it changes dramatically. I think President Trump is going to really drop the hammer on this. I think he's very serious about this. So I think it's going to. I believe it's going to change dramatically. I think President Trump is, he's offered the handout of help and assistance to Apple. They just went down to the plant in Texas. Right. Ivanka's done a great job of showing how the jobs of the future and the training of the future. But that's one thing.
You think if Tim Cook does not comply?
Look, I'm not in the government, but I will say this. Okay. I happen to think that directionally, if I were the guys at Apple, I would pay attention to President Trump's tweets.
Let me ask you about
I would treat his tweets like a papal bull.
Yeah, you've weighed in before on the people that didn't think impeachment was a huge danger to the president. You said you need to watch this very carefully, and you need a very strong response. You know what's going to come up on Tuesday. Where are we right now, and whether the president should want witnesses? Where does he stand in the Senate? It's still only 9 cents on predicted that the Senate convicts. But Would you say there's cracks in his support in the Senate at this point?
You see last night with what they're doing, look, they don't have a case, so they're trying to find information everywhere. The nullification project, and they understand, last night on that debate stage, and this is Van Jones saying this, not Steve Bannon, there's no way that debate stage is going to beat Donald Trump. Van Jones said that, okay? They're not going to beat Trump. They need to defeat Trump some other way, the nullification project. That's what the permanent impeachment party is going to continue on and on and on. If it's not about killing General Soleimani, it's about now Lev Parnas. They're going to continue to find things. That's, to me, the boil's got to be lanced. And the way we lance this is, I think you have a full trial. I think you let them have their witnesses. If they want Bolton, if they want Mulvaney, if they want the OMB emails, let's do it. The jury is not the Senate. The jury is the American people, and the audience is the world. Let's go back to the China deal. In the streets of Tehran, in the streets of Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Beijing, they're going to watch this closely, okay? That the established order is trying to shut down Donald Trump, and that's why, to me, he should get the House fire breathers in there. We should give him Bolton, and let's take the whistleblower. Right. I think his best witness, by the way, is Zelensky. Let's get President Zelensky in there. I think Zelensky would.
Kyle Bass.
Right.
That was great, you two. And Kyle, thank you.